Hello, welcome to the Underlords universe, and I'm Bryon, and I got my buddy Brent, who actually is my brother, and our buddy Josh. He's not
He's
our
not your
brother.
brother.
He's not, no, no. But we do operate under the name Underlords of the Overworld, and we create our own music and fiction like this, available on Amazon and Bandcamp, etc. And we like to talk about the stuff that inspires us. And today we've got an honorary Underlord with us, Bryon Dudley, who happens to be the host of Hair Metal Memories podcast, is a member of Strong Like Bear, the band, and a lot of other things. The guy's just multi-talented. If you're here, you say what, Bryon?
I like to have fun.
Yes, that's the whole point is having fun. And we've been having fun doing a discussion. We're all Oyster Cult fans, and we've been doing a multi-part discussion about the Oyster Cult catalog. And I'll put links to the other two episodes below if anybody stumbles across this and is curious about part one or part two. And let's see, we've been doing kind of the process we use is to give each song on an album up to 5 points and then divide for an average, and we kind of sometimes surprise ourselves with the results. So this is kind of your thing. Please like, subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications, and at the end we might do a little recap of our own stuff, and then we'll see where this goes. But we are doing the third part of our Oyster Cult discussion. The first part was the first 5 albums, the second part was the second 5 albums. This part is a little scattered because their productivity kind of got stretched out. We're going to be beginning with Imaginos. And then if anybody has a couple of comments along the way, they did a couple of kind of side things. We get Heaven Forbid. We get Curse of the Hidden Mirror. And we get The Symbol Remains. And then finally, which was just released, Ghost Stories. And so
A lot to unpack.
there's a lot to unpack here. Yeah, you bet. So obviously we're going to go through these chronologically. We'll talk about our highs, lows, etc. I'll be jotting down everybody's numbers along the way. And gosh, I don't know, you guys want to, who wants to jump in and start on Imaginos in terms of like maybe the background on the album? I'm sure you guys all know the background of the record.
It's a crazy story, and we could do an episode just on the question, is Imaginos a cult?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Because it has its origins really as an Albert Bouchard solo album. My understanding is that he had been working on it with Sandy Pearlman from the early 80s, and but the record company ultimately kind of said, yeah, well, we need Buck on it, we need Eric's vocal, etc. So
And wasn't it a trilogy of double albums is what he originally had planned?
I think so.
Which is insane.
Yeah, right. But there are so many songs that go back into the Oyster Cult catalog that are tied to this weird kind of alternate history, occult history of World War I thing, which, as a side note, Martin Popoff wrote 2 volumes kind of really fleshing out the whole kind of mythos of and kind of adding to it as well. So
Have you read those?
I read both of them earlier this year.
How are they?
They're interesting, I'll put it that way.
Episode on that.
Say what, Josh?
We'll do an episode on that.
Yeah, like you said, you could do a whole thing just on Imaginos itself, and I think you're right. In some ways it's safe to say in some ways it's not really a true honest Oyster Cult album, but in some ways, in my opinion, in some ways it's really super Oyster Cult because there's so much connectivity, there's so much connective tissue between that album and their past. So and I know it gets slagged a little bit. The production is kind of echoey in places. It kind of It's a little hard on the ears in certain ways, I think, production wise. I'd love to hear it remixed myself,
Mhm.
but it has a special place for me because it's one of the earlier Blue Oyster Cult albums that I actually heard in its entirety. So I'm I got that kind of memory bias going on. How
Mhm.
about you guys? When did you stumble across Imaginos for the first time?
This one's new for me. I actually had not heard Imaginos before. And so to me, going into it, I had no idea what to expect. And as I was listening to it, I thought it was like epic and dense, which I love epic, dense music. So I felt in my wheelhouse there. Like the shortest song, Del Rio's song, is like 5.5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah,
That's like the short one, you
Yeah.
know. And I feel like the long form of songwriting really plays to Blue Oyster Cult's strength. It sounds like a B.O.C. album to me.
right, yeah.
I was surprised by the history that it was so disjointed and weird and all of that because it ended up being one of my favorite ones actually.
Would you say that it sounds more cohesive than it should, given how
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um,
I would say that for sure.
and I wrote some notes here. Like for example, it's interesting. Like there's a lot of lead guitar players on this. Joe Satriani
Yeah,
plays on this. Mark
yeah, he used the
Biederman.
money. Joe Satriani used the money he earned from these sessions to fund Surfing with the Alien,
Oh, is that
which
right?
is yeah, which is like one of my favorite. That's my favorite Joe Satriani album. So that's like his classic.
I did not know that. That's interesting. He does the guitar solo on the Siege and Investiture of Baron von Frankenstein's Castle at Viseria,
Mhm. Yeah,
which is
yeah,
that title alone is
right.
just because it's such a mouthful. But yeah, and the other thing is that I find this interesting. Like the lead off track, "I'm the One You Warned Me Of," um, has Eric, but it also has John Rogers on vocals. And John Rogers would later join Blue Oyster Cult on bass, even though he doesn't play bass on this record. So it is you could really go deep into like who's on it, on what songs, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so yeah, we'll just kind of take it as it comes here. But I actually think "I'm the One You Warned Me Of" is I give that a 5. Like that to me is an absolute high point on this record.
Absolutely.
Um, I
Mhm.
think the Siege Investiture, I give that a 5 as well. In the Presence of Another World,
I love that song.
oh my gosh. Maybe it's easier for me actually to hit the lower points on the record than
Yeah.
high points. Because to me, the high points are all really, really consistent. I do think that Del Rio's song, I like it. I like it quite a bit. I give it a 3.5, but I think that and the remake of Astronomy are actually my lower points. I don't know. What do you guys think in terms of highs and lows on this record?
Mhm.
Um,
You go, Brent.
I'm going to agree. I'm the One You Warned Me Of is one of my favorite B.O.C. songs of all time. I think
Mhm.
it's just incredible. I love Blue Oyster Cult. That's a 5-star song for me.
Agreed.
That song gives me the chills when I hear that.
Agreed.
The
Yep.
vocals, keyboard work, it's just so atmospheric and dark. And um, I
So,
love Astronomy. This is my favorite version of Astronomy.
okay. So can
Mhm.
we just pause on those two songs then for just a second? Because Astronomy, as you say, it's a remake of the tune from Secret Treaties. But
Mhm.
you prefer this version over the
I do.
original.
I
Interesting.
do.
Okay,
I do.
Brian, Josh, what do you guys say as far as the way the remake of Astronomy compares to the original?
I struggled with it because they're re-recording a song. It's not actually one of my favorite Blue Oyster Cult songs, so it is a lower moment on the album for me. I like the song.
Hmm.
Um, but I listened to it and I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. So I went back and I gave it the same rating that I gave it before, which is 3.5.
Okay.
Because and I might like this version more. Like if you said which version do you want, I'd probably go with this version. But substantively, I just decided to give it the same rating I gave it before.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, Brian, what's your take on this version of
I,
Astronomy?
I like this version a little bit better as well. I gave it like a 4.3. I thought it was um I don't know. I like the moodiness of this version, I guess. It's just slightly more moody.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Which
Okay.
I thought benefited the song.
Sure.
I think the production of the album, although it's not the best, I think it actually makes these songs kind of what they are. You know, we've talked about production with other albums such as Born Again by Black Sabbath and other albums that are a little rough around the edges. And over the years, you just
Yeah.
kind of get used to how these records
Yeah.
sound. And I really can't imagine this album and these songs sounding any different. So
You know,
those would be my high points, but the rest of the album is great. I mean, the only low point, if you want to call it for me, is Del Rio's song. I'm gonna give that a 3. Everything else in this record is a 4 or a 5, somewhere in
so
between.
Yeah.
now something that was when we were kids, and I heard this for the first time, it was completely lost on me that the song Blue Oyster Cult is actually a remake of Subhuman. And
Wow.
it was years
Didn't
before
catch
I
that.
realized,
Mhm.
because Subhuman is
It's so much better. I mean, it's
on the remake it's I mean it's the same music, it's just
Yeah.
played and arranged differently and stuff. And I was like, whoa, once I realized that, then I was in a kind of a quandary because I love Subhuman. And it's like, okay, which one do I like better? And ultimately I'm with like Brent, you said you prefer the remake of Astronomy to the original. I actually prefer the song Blue Oyster Cult to the original Subhuman myself.
so do I. So do I.
Yeah, I think I do
I
too.
I love the song Blue Oyster Cult. It's a masterpiece.
Well,
Yeah.
and you know what's it? Robbie Krieger from the Doors did the solo on it,
Yeah.
and
I thought that was cool.
yeah, and it's a cool solo.
And that atmospheric bridge in the
Oh
song is just
yeah,
like, yeah, I love it. And I know in one of the previous episodes I had said I didn't like because there's a part where they're chanting their name. And I said I didn't like it when a band uses their name in a song.
right.
And I realized I'm a complete hypocrite because I love this song. I felt like they earned it on this though, you know.
Yeah,
So
there's exceptions, right? I
there's
mean,
exceptions.
yeah. It is interesting though, because I think typically, I think on average, most people would, when they like a song, they don't want to hear any other version of it, or they don't like any deviation. And
Mhm.
I think at least with the song Blister Cult that it's an improvement. I do disagree, but the thing about the remake of Astronomy is that I don't like the way they do that hey, hey, hey part. That doesn't quite work as well for me. But I mean, otherwise, I think this is just a really, really, really strong record. Even though you have, like John Rogers
Yeah.
and Joey Sarasano, who does the vocal on Frankenstein. But it's like, okay, so you got a guest vocalist here. I mean, his vocal, and I don't really know much about the guy, but his vocal
Yeah.
on Frankenstein is just,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
He sounds like Dio.
Kinda,
I
yeah.
thought.
Yeah.
I thought he sounded like Dio, which is about the highest praise I could
Yeah.
probably give it.
Yeah.
Right?
I never thought about that before, but now that you say it, it's like, yeah, I can totally hear that.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
when you think about the cast of characters that work on this record,
Yeah.
it all fits together really so nicely, even though it
Yeah.
should be very disjointed, right? But it doesn't
Yeah.
come across that way at all. It's very cohesive.
Yeah.
That part in Frankenstein, the mini moog, when the first time they do that, a drug by the name of World Without End, and then that mini moog
Yeah.
just goes up. It's like
That's
lifts the whole thing. And there's just the arrangement of that song is just so dynamic.
Yeah.
And I don't understand a lot of the I guess a lot of the disparaging remarks that this album gets. I mean, I understand that, art is subjective and people hear things differently, and there's a lot of things that influence the way we react to music. But I mean, even the band itself, and I kind of get this, I guess, but when they went out on tour, Albert Bouchard wasn't a part of the band really at the point. They go out on tour, and I think they might have played I'm the One You Warned Me Of maybe once or twice, and that was it. And they really didn't even promote the record. It just
Yeah.
kind of disappeared.
I remember when and I have a very, very distinct memory of being a senior and playing, this is a weird memory, Starfleet Battles in study hall. and talking about this record. And I think we actually listened to the in study hall
in
playing
study hall.
Starfleet Battles. Yeah, so really weird memory for me. And I remember it being kind of like, I don't know about this. But in hindsight and in retrospect, it's definitely one of my favorite B.O.C. albums. A song that no one has mentioned
Mm.
is Magna of Illusion.
I
Love
was
it.
just thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
I love that
Magna of
song.
Illusion is a 5.
Absolutely.
That song is a 5 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. May be one of my favorite B.O.C. songs.
Well, that's another one that Robbie Krieger did the solo on. So
Yeah.
you know, some Doors influence creeping in here. Makes
And
me
Doors
wonder-
and B.O.C. is a good flavor mix.
Oh, I know, right?
Yeah.
Have you? Has anybody picked up or read Robbie Krieger's autobiography?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I have it. Susan read it. I haven't read it myself, but I'm wondering now if he makes any references to those experiences doing stuff with B.O.C. because he plays on their cover of Roadhouse Blues on Extraterrestrial
Oh,
Live
that's right.
as well.
That's
So yeah, and in the Doors, I didn't realize until much later on how big of an influence the Doors really were on Oyster Cult. So
Hmm.
not that
I
it's
didn't-
glaring, but
Yeah, it makes sense when you say that, but I hadn't thought about that
yeah,
either.
yeah, no, but yeah, I think this is just, to me, it's a top shelf B.O.C. record, and I know that that's
Mhm.
contrarian to a lot of folks, but you know, it just
Yeah,
is.
this was one of the two big surprises for me in a most pleasant way. Like this was like discovering a hidden classic for me.
Yeah,
So like yeah. So thanks for doing this whole podcast thing because I got a couple new albums out of it that I didn't know, and I
outstanding.
love them.
Well, isn't that also raises, I think, an interesting point about music, the way we consume music. I think a lot of us, as we grow older, most of us, I think, tend to just really zero in on the stuff that we really loved when our brains were more plastic and we were absorbing all this stuff in our teen years. And I still love to come across new things or discover old stuff that I hadn't heard before. I try to not be dismissive of something just because it wasn't from, you know, my
Yeah,
own personal teenage years or whatever. So
yeah, same.
that makes me happy that you have said that. So yeah. Any other thoughts on the album as a whole? I gave it overall 3.78, and I'm looking at my numbers and I'm like, man, I was pretty hesitant. I don't know why. I guess when I actually put the numbers in, I kind of pull back a little
Surprised
bit
it's
because yeah. I mean, it's hard to say like everything's a 5, but it's pretty,
Right.
you know.
What
So
was your number again, Brian?
mine was let me double check. Mine was 3.78.
Okay, mine was 4.28.
Okay.
I gave it a 4.5 because of the new discovery factor.
Yes. Josh,
like that.
What was yours, Josh?
I gave it a 4.5 as well,
Okay.
which proves that great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Brian,
Now,
this could be a desert island album for me.
Oh, for
So,
sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
now it's kind of weird because, you know, they lose their record deal and, you know, they go on tour forever, as they say. I saw them at this little bar called the Runway. Josh, you and I saw them in 93, fall of 93, out in Davenport, and they actually played a Harvest Moon on that show. Do you
I
remember?
freaked out. Because and Buck said, I think it was Buck that said, and
Hmm.
Oh,
Oh, he's frozen.
he's
Josh.
frozen.
Josh. Hello.
can you hear me?
You froze for a sec. You are freezing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Stable.
just saw a message that says his network bandwidth is low.
Ah.
It said the Alchemist network bandwidth is low. So
Yeah. Okay. So what?
there it is again.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Can you hear
Mm.
me now?
Well, it's
Yeah.
not a matter of hearing you. It's a matter of it freezes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. You're on. What were you saying?
Did I have a memory of us seeing Harvest Moon live.
Yeah.
And I just a great memory of seeing that.
Yeah.
So, and the excitement of a new Blue Oyster Cult album. That was a great show. That's one of the best concerts I've ever seen because they were with.
Uriah Heep. Yeah. Yeah. And such. So the show I saw before at the runway, they played The Horsemen Arrive, which is
Oh,
on
Mhm.
That's
Bandcamp.
interesting.
So
That's
there's two songs on this that they did, Demon's Kiss and Horsemen Arrive, which I think Horsemen Arrive is actually a really, really good song.
especially that middle section, that middle part of that
Yeah.
song is so cool.
And then they did Cult Classic, where they
Mhm.
re-recorded, a bunch of old tunes. I actually think there's some versions like OD'd on Life Itself. I actually prefer the re-record of it and stuff, but
ETI,
they're kind of
ETI, Flaming
E-
Telepaths. I like those.
ETI, yeah, it's right. ETI, I think, is better on Cult Classic, but they're kind of in a wilderness phase because I guess they don't have quite the contract for new stuff. Um, Eventually they end up on CMC International, which used to be called what, Cheese Metal Cemetery or something like
Mhm.
that. CMC International was a label that tried to pick up some of these fledgling older acts, and they finally put out Heaven Forbid in
99?
98, which I thought was really good. What are your guys' initial impressions of uh Heaven Forbid? I'm looking for my notes on. There it is. Your initial impressions on Heaven Forbid.
I
For me,
wanted to
it
make
didn't
this.
hit me. It didn't hit me that hard.
Yeah.
It's not one of my favorite B.O.C. albums, and there's nothing bad on it really, but it's all very. I found it to be a very middle of the road. There's a lot of threes on this record. Um, I love Harvest Moon. Harvest Moon's at the high point for
Mhm.
me on this album. Damaged is good. Still Burning, I like that. Um, but overall, this is not a favorite record of mine. They sound a little
Mhm.
middle of the road on this, a little maybe
Okay.
even a little stale.
Okay, so I
Uh,
have a question. Can I ask
yeah,
Josh a question?
sure.
So,
Yes.
so I would not necessarily disagree with that, but I guess my question is, did you feel like that when the album initially came out, or has your feeling of the album changed over time? Because for me,
Good question.
I really liked the album when it came out, and I think my love of it or interest in it has waned a little bit over the years. So how's that worked out for you?
That's a good question. I remember when it came out, I remember not being blown away by it. And when I thought when I think I was thinking, well, I'll go back and listen to it now and really spend some time with it, and I'll end up really loving it. And I didn't. I mean, it's not a bad record. It's not a
No,
bad record. It's just it's a little bland. I guess
Mhm.
that's my word to describe it. It's kind of a bland record.
if I might, I would agree with Josh. I think it's very middle of the road. I have one, two, three, four, five of the songs that are in the three range. The only song I gave a five to, my favorite song on the record, is kind of a mellow song. It's X-Ray Eyes.
Oh,
Mhm.
That's a pretty good song. Yeah.
That's my favorite, and I love Real World, and I really like See You in Black and Harvest Moon and Power Underneath Despair. But there's some stuff that's like Hammer Back and Damaged. I just don't. Still Burning is a little bit too forced. I know it's like the sequel to Burning for You. It's not a bad song, but there's not bad songs on the album, but they're kind of middle of the road, like Josh said. I do like the production. I think the band sounds really good. Vocally, it's really strong. There's some good riffs. Like the riff on Power Underneath Despair during the chorus is really heavy. Hammerback's a nice heavy song. But for some reason, I just don't think the songs. I mean, it's 10 years removed from Imaginos, but the songs are just not as good. But like I said, for me, X-Ray Eyes is a hidden gem.
Good song.
I gave that a five. That's the only song on the album I gave a five to.
Which one, Brent?
Really, you know, Brent, it's weird. I gave
Excellent.
that song, I gave that a 3.5, but now that
Yeah. Um,
I think it's a really, really good song. Great vocal from Buck. Great guitar work. So yeah, that's my high point on the record. No low points, but like Josh said, it's very middle of the road.
Bryon?
This was the other one that I hadn't heard before that blew me away. Actually, I ended up loving it a lot just because I was unaware of its existence, and to me, it's like this is like their heaviest album.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would agree.
and so I was like surprised that they came back after listening to like Imaginos, and it's kind of like reverbed out and sort of like washy and everything. And this came back and they're just like muscly and like and just like we're a metal band. Remember that? So I really appreciated that, and the lyrics are really good. They got John Shirley wrote the lyrics, who's a sci-fi writer, and I had read some of his books before. I didn't know he worked with Oyster Cult, so I thought that was so I really like the lyrics a lot. See You in Black sounds like Motorhead, like that's as heavy as Motorhead to me, which is like
that's a really good comparison. I never thought about that, but that's very valid. I like that comparison.
Yeah, so I was really excited because I had to search for this. It's not on Spotify.
Oh, that's right. It's not. Yeah, and neither is Curse of the Hidden Mirror. I don't think, is it?
It's not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had to search for them, and so when I found them, and then then get this rewarded with all this heaviness and stuff, and there's a lot more instrumental exploration stuff on it, which being a big prog nerd, that spoke to me a lot.
Yeah, I think the playing and some of
Yeah.
the musical ideas and stuff are all really strong. I do agree with Brent and Josh. I think some of the album is more in the 3 range for me, especially kind of the second half of the record. But I do think there's some really strong stuff on there. I have always really liked Still Burning quite a lot. I think, Brent, I can see what you're saying about it sounds a little forced. I can kind of see that. I still like it a lot nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's super melodic though.
Very,
Yeah.
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 One of my favorite things about the record is the chorus on Power Underneath Despair, which they misspelled on the back cover, despair.
The beats are so insane in that,
if you just tap it out as a drummer in the chorus, it doesn't change.
It doesn't.
It's
right.
But what happens is I think the way the riff comes around and lands, I think it starts on the 1, and the second time around the what had been on the 1 is on the 2, and then it cycles back around again and it's back on the 1.
And it messes with your head. It makes you think that something's going on with the beat.
And it's not, it sounds a lot more complicated than it really is, but it's cool. I think it's really effective.
That was a 5 song for me actually, and I don't have a whole lot of 5 songs. That one really blew me away because it's like this is metal as hell.
I know, right? Yeah.
I give that a 4. I give that a strong 4.
I gave it a 4.5. So yeah, we're all we seem to be on in an agreement on some of the high points on this. I think the lyrics to Harvest Moon are kind of interesting. It seems like a bit of a kind of a murder mystery ghost story kind of thing.
Did they play that, Bryon, when we recently saw them? Did they play Harvest Moon? They still play that song quite a bit.
They play it all the time. I can't imagine they would not have played it for you guys. It's like a staple in their set. It has been.
I love that song. Yep. And I love that I saw them do that song 5 years before, 4 or 5 years before the album came out.
Yeah, I know. Because at that point we were like, number one, are we ever going to see B.O.C. ever again? Because back in '93, it's like, oh my God, these guys are old. We'll never see them again. End up seeing them so many times. But and then it was like, well, I mean, are they ever going to get a record deal again? So But when you're that age, you don't have as much of a perspective on time, I guess. But what did you think?
I love in Harvest Moon where they speed up the tempo and then it falls apart and then they start over again.
Yeah.
That live as a band in the studio. There's like, that was impressive.
that middle section is just like magic. It's just and how they like you said, Bryon, how they come out of it. It's just they spill out of that into the main riff.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, they practiced that.
Yeah.
That would definitely take some rehearsal. But yeah, that's a good call. That's definitely a high point on the record too. But yeah, what do you guys think of the whole like remake of In Thee, the acoustic?
I like the original a lot better. I could have done without I could have done without the remake.
I really struggle with the remakes, and because
Yeah.
for the most part, what I struggle with.
Yeah.
And unless something really hits me, I just give it the same.
Okay.
You guys like In Thee more?
Well,
Not a favorite song.
In Thee is one of my favorite songs from Mirrors, and this is kind of a live acoustic version, and I think it's fine, but I don't think it holds a candle to the original.
For these purposes, I didn't even consider it. I can give it a rating if you want me to. I didn't even rate it for the record.
Your call on
I
what
left it out. But I agree with you, Bryan. It's kind of like I can take it or leave it. The original for me is a 5-star song. This version, not so much. There's just something magical about that song on Mirrors. Here,
Yeah, I thought they don't sound like B.O.C. to me on this one.
It seems out of place.
Yeah.
Like Bryan was talking about how heavy the record is. Maybe it's their heaviest album. And then to kind of close it out with that, it just doesn't.
Yeah, it's like Happy Trails or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a weird choice.
Yeah,
it's not very effective. It's not very effective.
I ultimately gave this record a 3.54. What did you guys give Heaven Forbid?
3.70.
Okay.
4.8.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah, I loved this record. Yeah.
Josh, what did you give it again?
3.54, just like you.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other thoughts or comments on Heaven Forbid? I think it was a really strong comeback album for its time, but of course their output since then has been, pretty sporadic. So
yeah, it was a brand new record for me, so that's where a lot of my enthusiasm for it probably comes from. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, because I actually really liked the record when it came out, and I still like it quite a bit. But when the follow-up came out, Curse of the Hidden Mirror, which was on Sanctuary Records and CMC and Sanctuary. Sanctuary ended up, I think, buying out CMC or however that worked, and then BMG owned all of it. But I think it kind of got lost in the shuffle in terms of releases that year, which was what, 2001. But nonetheless, when Curse of the Hidden Mirror came out, I was kind of like, oh, great, another Blue Oyster Cult album. It's gonna be just kind of a continuation of Heaven Forbid, which I thought was really solid. Maybe not the greatest thing ever, but I thought it was really solid. I liked it. This one fell a little flat for me. I was really glad that a new Blue Oyster Cult album was out at the time, but at the same time, it was a little bit more middle of the road for me, with a couple of songs that I don't dislike, I could can kind of skip. So
yeah,
I don't know. What's your guys' overall thoughts on
this was flat for me too.
Yeah, same kind of response.
Yeah, I thought the songs don't really do it. I thought like the production seems really flat somehow, and so it doesn't sound like they're very excited about it. Doesn't sound like the engineer is very excited about it. And the cover art's kind of lame too, I thought.
Yeah,
I know that's nitpicking, but
I mean, in a certain way, the cover art to me almost seems like a pastiche of Blue Oyster Cult art.
Yeah,
but
right. Right. That's a good way to put it.
Although that may not be fair to the artist.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't capture the record though. I don't know. Everything seems all disjointed and flat. Like it's like they just said, "Here, we made it."
Okay. And even though it might be kind of a flat album sonically and in terms of the songwriting, are there any high points for you? And if so, what are they? Or is it all just consistently just middle of the road?
The Old Gods Return. I liked I
Mhm.
liked that one a little bit.
Yeah.
One Step Ahead of the Devil, I thought. Yeah, my note on that was Signs of Life.
That's One Step Ahead of the Devil is my favorite track on the record. Yeah.
Second that.
Wow.
That's the only 5-star song on the album for me.
I didn't give any
Wow.
fives for this
I
record.
Wow.
did.
Josh,
I
what
did.
Yeah, so I would agree with you guys to a certain degree. I like this record more than Heaven Forbid. Um, particularly because there are two standout tracks for me that scored high. I love Dance on Stilts. That's a 4.5. I
Oh,
think that's a
okay.
great song.
Mm-hmm.
I think the album sounds good. Old God's Return is absolutely a standout track.
Mhm.
It's so Lovecraftian.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. It's so catchy. That's actually Old God's Return is actually one of my favorite B.O.C. songs of all time.
I gave it a
Wow.
3.5.
Love that song.
I gave it a 3.5. And I agree
That's a
with
5 for me.
wow. Dance on Stilts, I think the first half of it is kind of, middle of the road. I like the second half of the song quite a lot, that You Elevate Me part. And I
Oh yeah.
like the kind of the circular riffing underneath it in the end. And I think in the end it's a pretty good song. I gave that a 3.5 as well.
I
But
did too.
um so Josh, would you say those are the big high points for you?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Well, I gave it
Yeah.
that song
Which
Out
one?
of the
Which one?
Darkness.
Josh, which one
Uh,
again? You cut out again.
what? Sorry, One Step Ahead of the Devil.
Oh, yeah,
I gave
okay.
3.5.
Yeah.
I gave 4s to Out of the Darkness and Stone of Love.
Oh, I gave two
Yeah,
and a half to both of those.
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay,
I don't know why this album just popped a little more for me than Heaven Forbid.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're wrong, but that's okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, but like I've said before, when I hear somebody, especially someone I know, one of my friends say, "Oh no, I like that song a lot." It kind of makes me go, "Oh well, yeah, I'll listen to it
Yeah.
again because maybe they're hearing something in it that I'm not hearing." Because I like to do that. So when we get done with this, I'm throwing those on while I clean the house. So
Mhm.
maybe it's good
Right.
house cleaning music. Could be good house cleaning
Could
music.
be, yeah, yeah. It just has its purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say is the low point, Josh?
Uh, it ends a little soft. So
Good to feel hungry.
Good to
yeah,
feel hungry.
Yeah. You know,
it is good to feel hungry.
well,
Don't
it
get me
is.
wrong.
To this day,
You're
Susan,
right.
we will oftentimes when we're like really hungry or going somewhere for dinner or whatever, and it's taking a while or something, Susan or I will
Yeah.
say something. Well, it's good to feel hungry when you're about to eat well.
Well, and as Still Burning was the sequel to Burning for You.
Mm-hmm.
Good to Feel Hungry is the sequel to Hungry Boys.
Ooh,
Did you know that? That's a fact.
wow.
I talked about that with Buck when I
Yeah.
when I ran into him on an elevator in
And did he confirm
that's
that?
that's what I asked him when I
Did
in
you
Cedar
really?
Rapids when I rode with him on an elevator. I said, Buck,
Wow.
I get to talk to you.
I It's really unfortunate that his right in the middle of a good story that he cuts out
Right. Where we met Buck Dharma.
I know, like right in the middle of meeting Buck Dharma, he cuts out. Good Lord. But we'll just have to pick up the slack. It's a good freeze frame on him though.
Yeah. I
So
just like to be bad was a low point for me too.
yeah, it's just a song to me. It's like, okay, here's a song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you want to finish your Buck story, and then I'll chime in with a few comments.
Yeah, Josh, your whole Buck story cut out.
Yeah, I rode on an elevator
Yeah,
and I was making a joke.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Boy, he's having trouble today.
I was so
Yeah, yeah. Good story. Good story. Um,
Yeah.
so okay, Brent.
Um, I think the majority of this album is middle of the road. I think I gave 3 or 3.5 stars to 9 of the tracks.
Hmm.
Um, there's a couple songs on the album I think I would consider to be kind of jokey, and I don't know
Hmm.
that the album benefits from that. I Just Want to Be Bad is a jokey song, and I think Good to Feel Hungry. Now I gave them 3 and 3.5 stars. I don't hate the songs, but they're kind of jokey. The record is a little disjointed. I don't know that it flows particularly well. There's some really poppy songs on the record.
Hmm.
Um, I don't dislike or like things based on whether they're poppy or not, but they just kind of to go from like, maybe something like The Old God's Return to Pocket. There's not
Yeah.
Those songs really don't have a whole lot in common. Showtime, I'm not a particularly big fan of Showtime. Um,
Mhm.
my favorite song is One Step Ahead of the Devil. I think that's a 5-star song. It's the heaviest song on the record. And interestingly enough, the only other song that I gave a 4 or higher to is Here Comes That Feeling, which is very poppy.
Mm,
And nobody's talked about that
Yeah.
song. I think it's a really, really good song. But the rest of the album is it's kind of middle of the
Yeah.
road. It's the production, I think I would describe it as being kind of airy and
Yeah.
dry. And the production's not as wet as it was on the previous album. And I just don't think the songs are there. And again, the jokey songs, not bad, but I don't really like it when they're over the top jokey. Um,
Yeah.
I prefer a little more tongue in cheek, and those two songs are a little bit out there.
mm,
Yeah, I agree with it, like basically everything you just said. I thought Here Comes the Feeling. I thought that should have been the single and not Pocket. I think they
mm,
screwed
Oh,
up there.
I
I
agree
think
with
putting
yeah.
Pocket out as the single was like kind of a bad idea. I don't know why they chose that one. Here Comes the Feeling. That feeling would have been like a really good single.
I
That's a
think
good
so
point.
too.
That's a
That's a
really
really
good,
good
yeah.
song.
Yeah, but Pocket, I had actually forgotten that Pocket was the single from that record.
Mhm.
Right, because it doesn't seem
And
like one.
right, and it's like, and I'm looking at my scores, and it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a couple songs I rated lower than Pocket, but I mean, Pocket's okay. I gave it a 3. It's like I don't dislike it, but it's like I wouldn't promote the
Yeah.
record with it.
Well, and
Yeah, someone.
I think the band they played Dance on Stilts live for a number of tours
Yeah,
after this record came out. So the band was really a fan of Dance on Stilts.
yeah.
Mhm.
The rest of the record, I don't know that they played that much of it live, but
I don't. I think
it,
yeah, I think you're right, and I think that Here Comes That Feeling would have been a better single, and I agree. And then and they should have been playing One Step Out of the Devil live. That would have been a great live tune, I think.
oh,
So,
Mhm.
but yeah, overall, my rating came in as a solid 3. Josh, what was yours for?
I look at this and it's a 3.72, which,
Okay,
Mhm.
as I look at a couple other ratings, I'm a little surprised. And I think it's just because it maybe got pushed up by Old Gods and Dance on Stilts.
and that happens, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
oddly enough, and we'll get to it, it does rate just a hair higher than their next album, which when I look at that in retrospect, it's like, should it?
well, I mean,
Yeah.
and your own taste can alter and change over time too. I mean,
Yeah.
that happens to us.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
Bryon, what did you give Curse?
I was at a 3.8 for it.
Three
I felt
point.
like I was pretty, yeah, 3.8. I felt like I was pretty brutal to it, but like, apparently
Apparently not. Like in
not.
comparison, yeah. Although compared to Heaven Forbid, I mean, it really was a
Yeah,
drop for you for sure.
right.
What
Definitely.
Brent? What was your score for?
3.50.
Okay, okay. And then of course we get this just massive dry spell
Okay.
from the band until they end up with Jules Rodino on drums. They get Richie Castellano in the band, and they play, I mean, just year after year, kind of really honing that lineup. And then they eventually on Frontiers, back in this came out in 2020, didn't it?
I think
Yeah,
it's older than that.
yeah. The Symbol
Yeah,
Remains,
2020.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is a line from Shadow of California
Mhm.
Hmm.
from Revolution by Night. So it's kind of a nice nod
Mhm.
in terms of to the past in terms of the album title. Long record, 14 tracks. Uh, got really good reviews when it came out a few years ago. I think
Mhm.
understandably so. Personally, I think it's an improvement on Curse of the Hidden Mirror. When
Mhm.
I rated this and I went through this though, I expected it to be much higher over Curse of the Hidden Mirror than it actually came in at. So, and Josh, I think you just said that this actually rated lower than Curse of the Hidden Mirror for you. Is that right?
0.01 lower. So this came out
Wow.
3.7 for me.
So,
No, I mean, it shows that it's, for me, but by the numbers, it's really comparable with Curse of the Hidden.
yeah.
You're
But
gonna pull out a B.O.C album and just throw it on. I would throw on Curse of the Hidden, or Symbol Remains
mhm.
over Curse of the Hidden Mirror.
Which
Just
is, I mean,
my
when you-
instinct. My instinct says that's a better record.
well, when you're getting to, tenths of it's just like, yeah.
Yeah, but still, I think it's a better record than Curse.
Well, and you can
Yeah.
make those decisions in your ranking
Yeah.
it's your choice, but but I really I liked it when it came out. I still like it. I still think it's a really strong record. I still listen to it. I'm so glad that they had committed to an album of new stuff, and I do think there's some highs and lows on it, but Brent, Bryon, what were your initial reactions when it came out?
Definitely better than the last one. I don't think it's like great necessarily, but it's really not bad, and I'm really happy it exists, and it's probably better than it has a right to be, in all honesty, at this point.
That's a way to put it. Brent, when it came out, what was your
Oh, well, very excited when it came out. When I heard the advanced single, which I believe was Box in My Head. I think that was the first song they put out.
that's right, yeah.
Poppy, very B.O.C.-ish. Sounds great. The record sounds fantastic. It's one of their best sounding records, I think. But again, for me, and I thought as we were going through this exercise, and this has been kind of a revelation, I don't like this record as much as I thought I did. The numbers just don't bear that out. So I gave 11 of the songs in this record either a 3 or a 3.5. So there's a lot of middle of the road stuff on here. For me, the high point is The Alchemist. That's the best song on the record. It's got a fantastic video. I love that.
I agree.
Eric does a phenomenal job on that song.
That's a 5.
Yeah, I give it 5 too.
I do like That Was Me.
Was
I think
a big
that's
one.
a really good way to start the album. And the other, I gave that a 4, and then I gave The Return of Saint Cecilia a 4. And I do like on that song, the kind of Highway Star beginning of it. The very beginning of the song is kind of reminiscent of Highway Star. Richie does a good job with the vocals on these songs, but the thing is, my opinion, it's only what it is. When Richie does lead vocals, it doesn't really sound like B.O.C. as much. It almost sounds like it's a Richie Cassiano solo thing or whatever. And he's got a phenomenal voice. The guy does everything. He does everything extremely well, from guitars, keyboards, production, everything. He's just a very talented guy. And I like his voice, but when he does the lead vocal, it just it doesn't seem like it's as much B.O.C. When you hear Buck or Eric, then it's like, yeah, okay, this is what I'm used to. If that makes any sense. It's not that the record is better or worse.
I mean, it's of course. I mean, it's a central feature, central sound of a band, right?
Yeah, and am I glad Richie sings on this album? Absolutely. Because he does Saint Cecilia, which I think is one of the standout tracks on the record, but it's different. It's nice to have him contributing because he's very competent in that regard. But I think a lot of the songs are kind of middle of the road. What with a long album, unless the songs are really good, if you have a lot of music, it drags everything down. So it kind of waters it down a little bit. So I like the record. I didn't like it as much as I thought it would.
I do want to make a comment about the idea of a vocal element here, because obviously in the early B.O.C. days, the only one who didn't do vocals was Alan Lanier. So because Albert Bouchard has a very distinctive voice. When I hear his voice, because there's so much of it in early B.O.C., I it makes me think of B.O.C. And the same with Joe Bouchard. And I know I'm kind of jumping forward here, but the fact that the lead single on the new album, Ghost Stories, was sung by Joe Bouchard, that was like, a blast from the past vocally. It's like that's a sound of Oyster Cult.
Right.
And it's kind of like with Richie doing lead vocals, it's like, well, okay, that's like a new sound in Oyster Cult, and it's, you know,
Mhm.
I have to kind of adjust to that a little bit. So I
Right.
think you make an interesting point there. I agree with you. The Alchemist is if I had to pick one tune that's the best song on the record, it would be The Alchemist, which, and I think there's interesting lyrics on this record. You know, if you read the lyrics to The Alchemist or the song Fight, which I like Fight. I think it's an interesting way to close the record, and I like it more once it dawned on me that the fight really didn't happen, or that there's not really much of a fight there. It's like,
Yeah.
it's I think there's a level of cleverness to some of these lyrics that that are kind of fun. Having said that, though, there are some down moments for me on this record, but oftentimes people name check Tainted Blood. You know, Brent Richie sings the lead on that, on Tainted Blood. A lot of folks really like Tainted Blood. I do like it, but I don't know. I really struggle to give anything more than a 4. Like I can't quite put my finger on why I don't. It's like I like it. I recognize that it's a really good song, but I can't quite get myself to say it's great. But I don't know. What do you guys think about Tainted Blood?
Tainted Blood.
I gave it a 3.5.
Okay.
I like it. I think didn't they play it live? That's been in their setup. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was one where the vocals were mixed a little louder. That's what I liked about it.
Yeah. I thought Edge of the World was the chorus of the Edge of the World just I don't know. That kind of threw me off a little bit. I think the solo section in Edge of the World is really great, but I just really don't like the chorus. I think Martin Popoff referred to it as a yacht rock chorus. And I made a note of that here. Because you know, and I personally, another lower point for me is Train True.
That was the lowest point for me.
Was it really? So I'm curious, Bryon. So for you, for me, one of the things that I just don't like about it, it's like, okay, we have a song about a train, so it's got to have, it's like, it's just got to have that snare.
Sure.
Thing. I just thought, wouldn't that be the moment where you kind of avoid the cliche and you do something different? I don't know. So that didn't really work.
It's the goofy song. It's like you know, you were talking about on the previous album, like the novelty songs or the funny songs. It's like that's really not their expertise, I don't think.
I agree. And that and Florida Man kind of falls into that category as well. But Josh, didn't you say you actually like Florida Man?
I like it better.
Oh, okay. I was thinking
I gave it a 3. So I mean, I think I like it more than when the album first came out. But no, it's not a huge, and I agree with you about Train True. That's I do want to say that I think Tainted Blood. I want to jump back to Tainted Blood.
Okay. Yeah.
I gave it a 4.5. I actually think it's a true B.O.C classic, and I love Richie's singing with the band. I think Richie's like he's just, I think where he fits in that band is so great. I'm a huge Richie fan. I think I'd love to see him do another album with Richie, just a true studio album with Richie, because I think he fits in that band so well, and what he does for the band. I'm just a big fan. So love Tainted Blood, love all the stuff he sings. He's a huge part of this record and what makes this record really good.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. What'd you guys ultimately give it? Mine was 3.17, so it was just barely over Curse of the Hidden Mirror, which kind of surprised me, because when I first listened to this record, I was like, yeah, I really like it. I like a lot of this stuff. But then when I ended up rating it, it didn't rate it quite as high as I expected. Brent, I think you said the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah, and I gave it a 3.43. Yeah, that was my exact same experience.
Okay. Bryon, what'd you give it?
At a 4.3.
Okay. And Josh?
3.71.
Oh, okay.
Well, I ended up liking this one the most. That's a surprise to me.
Well, you know, if anybody
Yeah.
has anything else that they want to throw in on the Symbol Remains, that now's a good chance to do so, or we do have an opportunity to segue into the new one.
Okay, I did want to talk about the Alchemist just briefly. I
Oh,
thought like
sure.
the
Yeah.
vocal on that reminded me of Danny Elfman, which made me like it a whole lot instantly. I thought that and the harmonized guitar part too is just like stunning. But like I thought they would have been better off if they would have put the Alchemist earlier in the album in the sequence. I think that
Oh,
like
that's an interesting point.
yeah, I think it would have come out like they would have come out guns blazing a little bit more, if they would have done that. But
that's a really good point. Sequencing of an album, I think, is really important when you're an album-oriented listener.
right, right. Yeah, and they're an album-oriented band.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And
Absolutely.
and that makes me think of something Brent said earlier about, you got 14 songs on this record, and obviously on a CD or in streaming, you put as much on there as you want, really. I mean, I know there's
over 61 minutes long.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily make a better record. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if they had stuck with 10 tracks and saved 4, you're 40% towards another record.
Right.
And it's like,
right.
I mean, certainly between those guys, you could come up with 60% of another album, right? I mean, which is what Josh was saying about you'd really like to see another album of
this lineup.
With this lineup and a true album really featuring Richie Castellano as this album does, because even though it's not my favorite Blue Oyster Cult album, I like it a lot, and I'd like to see more from these guys. So
yeah, I was kind of noticing a connection between all the early albums. Almost all of them had 9 songs.
Really?
It was really strange. It took them a long time to break that trend, before they had like more than 9 songs, and then when they do, it's like 14.
Maybe there's some sort of secret meaning behind all of that.
That's the alchemy.
Exactly. So Ghost Stories.
Yeah.
You guys ready for Ghost Stories then?
Oh yeah.
All right. Okay.
Great cover.
This is one of my favorite
things about it.
Yeah, the cover's great.
Yeah.
I am considering buying this on vinyl because I love the art so much. I think it's so cool. And as somebody else pointed out, because I'm not smart enough to notice these things, I just noticed something else though. Okay, so somebody pointed out that there's a little moon right there.
Yep.
Which is identical to the moon that's on the debut album, which I don't have in front of me. And I just noticed this. I don't know if it's probably too washed out here but right above my finger there's a Saturn,
yeah,
which is on the kind of back cover of Agents of Fortune. And so there's a lot of little like Easter egg stuff in the artwork and the video. I think it's a really, really attractive piece of art. That might be the best thing I can say about the record, though.
5.0 art.
5.0 art.
That doesn't help the score of the record.
No, it does not help the score of the record. Can I, since I'm already yapping, do you mind if I start this one? Or
no, go ahead, go for it.
Okay. I was a little hesitant. I mean, I was happy this came out. I'm still happy it came out. I'm but when I saw who was on it, I thought that's really great. I mean, and I do think the project is a really great project. This idea of bringing back, kind of bringing the band full circle in terms of its recorded, output, which is cool. But personally, I'm not a huge fan of We Got to Get Out of This Place or Kick Out the Jams. I don't understand. I never liked, honestly, that those were on their live albums. It's like, dude, you got great songs. Why are you playing these covers live? So to me, their live albums kind of suffered from that, and I wasn't all that thrilled about hearing what almost sound to me like pseudo studio versions of it, because they sound like they're almost live in the studio versions. And so, and then of course the Beatles cover, I'm kind of like, guys, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Maybe not.
That was my note on that. No.
And that's not just, I'm not a Beatles purist or fanatic
That-
actually. And you know, I mean,
No.
I'll actually go out there and say there's some Beatles covers that I like more than the original Beatles songs.
Them, same.
This is not one of them.
No.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
Whoever's idea that was, they should,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But you know, to me, this is kind of like a diehard fans album. It's like, you know, the fan that has
Yeah.
to have everything. The fan that's curious about the little nooks and crannies and the songs that didn't quite make it. And then you kind of learn, well, maybe
Yeah.
this is why they didn't quite make it. And that's okay. You still love the band and you still love what they're doing. I actually
It's kind
think
of it's a leftovers collection, right? Is that
that's, yeah,
Leftovers.
mostly like what, 78 to 82-ish, somewhere in there.
yeah?
And, you know, and then
So it's
they,
like the stuff that didn't make the other albums, and it's like
You
collected.
can hear it. You can hear it.
yeah,
A lot.
yeah. I'm not a fan of songs like Cherry. Where are my
Oh.
It's like I didn't
Yeah.
I don't like that song. Shot in the Dark I didn't really like. Brent, I think you said you like Gun, right?
Yeah, Gun's my favorite song on the record. I gave that a 4.
Oh
That's
wow,
the
see,
highest,
I
that's
give
the
it,
highest rating I gave of anything on this record.
to me, Gun
Yeah.
2.5. It's just there. There's really
Yeah.
nothing on this record.
It's-
Except I do actually think So Supernatural is cool. I don't
It's
think
a little
Joe's vocal is the greatest necessarily, but I really, for some reason, I love the chorus of So Supernatural. And I did the kind of the first, second time I heard it. It was like that. I do like that.
yeah. I like the tune on that one, but I didn't like the mix. I thought it was like, and I thought the mix got in the way of it, you know, like to the point where it's hard to enjoy it. So it's
I
like
can
over
see-
compressed and it sounds muted or something.
yeah. And I wonder, I don't know, Brian,
But, you know.
since you're a recording engineer guy, I mean,
Mhm.
have you, because my understanding is that they used some AI technology in order to separate
Mhm.
the different elements of the original song so that they could work on them,
Mhm.
and I wonder if that ended up, you know, based on what they're working with, you know, they had, you know, a
Mhm.
limited capacity to kind of really make this sonically
That could be.
and
That could be if it was something where something was buried in the mix together, and in order to extract it from the mix, they lost some of the frequency range or something like that.
yeah,
And then
okay.
they probably overcompensated by, you know, jacking up the compression or something like that. So that's a pretty good theory, really.
Because that was one of my first observations. I was listening to it on the way home from work the day it came out, and I thought, it sounds like demos to me. It
Right.
doesn't sound fully realized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Josh, when I mentioned kick out the jams and we got to get out of this place, you looked like you were going to fall over in your chair. So
I was gonna fall over. So I'm gonna engage you. We're gonna lock horns on this. So this is a bit of a tangent. Okay, but we'll get back to Ghost Stories. Some Enchanted Evening is one of my Desert Island live albums of all time. It was my first Oyster Cult album ever. One of my favorite live albums, one of my favorite B.O.C. albums. I love those two songs on that record. So I get what you're saying about, well, they have so many great songs, why play covers? But the energy on those two songs is so perfect for that live record. I would not take them off the live album. I'm glad they played them. I love having those recordings. Why they felt the need to do pseudo studio versions of them and put them on this record is, to me, they're rather pointless on this. It's magic in that moment and in the context of that live album. It's not magic to have them here. And I don't even really care that they did those on this album.
I can see what you're saying about that. I do disagree about, you know, about their placement on Some Enchanted Evening, but I do see what you're saying. And I get it. I get it. Yeah.
God. You know, nobody's talking about Soul Jive.
I was just gonna say Soul Drive, waiting for someone to say Soul
Soul
Drive.
Jive is, to me, the real standout gem. Like, I actually gave that a 4.5. I love Soul Jive. It's rough, and I think it could have been built into something better. But just the foundation, I scored really high. God, Brent, Gun, I gave it a 2.5. and
I
I
get
think
gun
it was
2.5 as well.
generous.
I like it.
Mhm.
I like it.
Barry, I gave a 2.5. I mean, it's like, what the hell? Why are you imitating Gene Simmons? That's almost just like a Gene Simmons song.
Which song? I,
Cherry, it's just so bad.
I don't hear Gene Simmons doing
If
that, but
Gene
that's
did it,
okay.
it would actually be pretty cool.
I-
If Gene did it,
Okay.
like when B.O.C. does it, it sucks. I had the first time ever in all the albums I've rated with you guys, and in other forums,
Yeah.
I had the first 0, and it was If I Fell.
Yeah.
Why the hell?
Yeah.
One,
I-
why the hell
I-
did you do it?
I gave it
Two,
a pity 2.
oh, that was being nice.
Yeah, I feel like I was pretty
The
generous.
fact that you did it, okay, people do things. I've done stupid things. I don't even say some of the stupid things I've done in my life, but I wouldn't put those stupid things on a record for everybody to hear. Why did you put that out there?
Right.
That's a 0.
Well,
And it kind of stings because this might be their last album, and if that's how they're
It
going to
is.
close out their last
It is
album,
their
it's just
last
sort of like no.
I
It
know.
is their last album. This has been kind of branded as this ends Oyster Cult's recording career, and it's like,
Yeah,
I wish they would have just done another album with the current lineup, because that would have been,
agreed.
so
Yeah.
much better.
Yeah. Or, come to think of it, what could have been kind of cool is if they had gone back and maybe put out a series of like some archival live recordings, and then maybe put on a few of these studio pieces as like little bonus bits
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
bonus tracks on like a series of live stuff that you could kind of brand as an archival thing or something.
Yeah.
Which
They needed
because
a better editor.
yeah, because again, I just look at that and it's like, man, that should be great.
Well,
Should be
and
great.
promoted
Yeah, it's
it
the final
and
B.O.C.
kind of
album. It should be great.
branded it. And Donna was telling me, and I haven't looked into this, but she was telling me that the album is actually charting pretty well.
Hmm.
And it's kind of sad because it's like, I feel like albums sometimes like this chart really well because it's like, oh, it's like the original B.O.C. and oh, this is
Yeah.
going to be great. And it's like, go buy The Symbol Remains.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know.
It's just that's a much better record.
Yeah, I know. That's a weird dynamic, but it exists, and but I'm glad the album exists. Honestly, I mean,
I am
it's
too.
like,
Yeah.
and I will put it on from time to time and listen to it, and there are things about it that I do like. I actually think the song "Don't Come Running to Me" is actually,
That's a good song.
yeah,
That's a good song.
it's a little 80s-ish, it's a little early 80s.
I'm glad you brought that song up because who's doing the vocals on that song?
It's Eric.
Eric.
It's an
It's
Eric
Eric.
song.
Yeah.
God, I actually wondered, is it Richie?
No,
No, it's
Because
Eric.
it does not sound like
Eric.
Eric Bloom to me at all.
well,
It is. I watched the interview with him, and he even talked about that.
yeah.
He said he was at. People are asking if that's really him, and he says, "Yeah, that's me. That's me on the vocal."
That's a real. I gave that a 4. I do like that song.
It's funny. I gave it a 2.5, and I actually think it's probably better than that. I think my note just says drumming at end, and that's from like the Revolution by Night sessions. That's Rick Downey on drums. And I think that one of the high points musically on the record is actually his drumming at the end of that song, which is really nice. I think it's really tasty. So, I think that there's moments on this record that are definitely worthwhile to a diehard B.O.C. fan. Then on the other hand, you can say, well, but some diehard B.O.C. fans they don't want to hear subpar stuff. So I guess it just depends on what kind of diehard B.O.C.
Yeah.
You
Where your line is.
Yeah.
To your point, I am glad they put this out because as a B.O.C., as a fan, for me, having this record is really cool. The way it was branded is this is kind of our last album. This is our last album.
Yeah.
It's like, and there's some real duds.
Yeah.
I want to throw out a couple of things. Money Machine, I think, is a good song. I like
Pretty
Money
good.
Machine. I gave that a 3.5.
Good, yeah.
I gave that a 3.5. I gave So Supernatural a 3.5. I like that. I think it's got some really cool parts to it. It's kind of dark, atmospheric. It does kind of drag a little bit. It seems like it's really long. It could have been, they could have shortened it up, maybe made it a little bit more interesting, make it more compact. But this album has some real stinkers. Cherry, we got to get out of this place.
Yeah.
The Only Thing, and I'm sorry.
I gave that a 2.5. That's not.
I gave The Only Thing a 2.5. If I Fell, I gave that a 1. I probably should have given it a 0. When I heard that, I think my skin crawled. It was just, it was like, oh my God. It's like, it's like, guys, if you're going to do this, it has to be. Who listened to this and thought this was good? Somebody, oh yeah, this is, it's awful. It's probably one of the worst things they've ever done. And to end a record like that, I'm like, I'm not convinced this is their swan song. I'm not, after watching this recent interview with Eric.
Really? What do you think?
You're right.
Well, they didn't come right out and ask them, you know, well, this is the end of the career, but he basically just said, look, this is really kind of a package that diehards are really going to get, and diehards are going to really appreciate it. So it's kind of geared towards that fan base. But he didn't come right out and say, we're not going to do anything ever again. And Richie's never said that. So I'm not convinced of it. The next record, I think, would be their 20th, if I'm not mistaken. So if they wanted to do 20 records, they could do another one.
No,
this is just, oh, okay. Well, I'm wrong.
Well, we just did. This is our 3rd episode with five records each, right?
But you've got things in there like the soundtrack,
like, and maybe the live albums, whatever.
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
But this album just has too many low points, and you know, you guys mentioned Soul Jive. It's okay. There's some okay moments on here, but the bad stuff is so bad. It's really bad.
Is that you mentioned the only thing? Is that's like the closest they've ever come to doing a ballad, right?
Oh yeah, and it's terrible. I gave it a 2.5. I think I was probably overly generous. It's just the execution on some of these songs, and I agree, they're probably just glorified demos. They're just not. They're just not there. And I appreciate the record for what it is. I'm glad I have it, because there are some tracks on here that I enjoy. But man, the stuff that's bad, it's bad.
So Brent, what did you give it then for a score?
2.83.
You gave it a higher score than I did. I gave 2.37.
Okay, well,
which is interesting, because I'm looking at like my score for So Supernatural, and I could see adding half a point or you know, give or take there as well. Or I could easily
subtract a couple of points, Brian, to get down where you are for sure. Because there's a couple there. I'm like, man.
Brian, what did you give it?
I ended up at a 3.1, and I feel like I would feel like I kind of feel like I want to adjust mine too. I feel like I was over generous at some points, but
well, you know,
I was trying really hard to like it.
As a true B.O.C. fan, you know, you want to, right? Josh, what did you give it?
2.92.
Okay. Interesting. I actually gave it the lowest score of all of us, but
we're not that far apart though.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Did you guys want to do kind of your individual countdowns? I do have my props. If you guys brought yours, great.
Ready.
You can just
I'm ready for the 5. If we want to go
5, 4, 3, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, y'all ready?
Yep.
Okay, so for in the number 5 spot for this set of B.O.C. albums, my last is Ghost Stories.
Ghost Stories.
Yeah. Same with you, Brian.
Yep. Okay. Unanimous.
Yep. Definitely unanimous there. In the 4 spot for me was Curse of the Hidden Mirror.
Curse of the Hidden Mirror.
Brian, the two Bryans got it right. And Josh, yours is
Heaven Forbid.
And Brent, yours Symbol Remains. Okay. In the 3 spot for me was The Symbol Remains.
Same. We got Bryon Unity today, apparently.
Yes, Bryon Unity. Yes.
Well, I'm the only oddball with this one then.
Yeah. Okay. In the number 2 spot for me was Heaven Forbid.
There you go. Now we're talking.
Okay, the two brothers are now in line. Okay.
Yeah, it was Imaginos for me.
Oh, it was.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Oh, we know what Brian's number one is because it was like almost like five. It was almost a five if I remember
Yeah.
what Brian gave this next one. So
Wow.
And my number
Yeah.
one of this
Oh,
is
yeah.
Imaginos. And
Nice.
Brian,
Heaven forbid I went with. Yeah.
wow, heaven for
Wow.
that's right. You did. It just edged it out for you barely, right?
Yep.
But they're we're talking
Yeah.
really small margins.
Decimal points.
So,
Yeah.
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 So are you guys up for I'm happy to crunch the numbers and see what our like aggregate lists.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah, do that.
And so I think the last time we did this, when we did the Rush stuff with our friend John, I think we did individually the whole, like our individual lists
Okay.
all the way down. And Brian, if you want to, you can feel free to bring whichever physical ones you have along, and or you can verbalize it like you just did. Either way, it works just fine. And then at the end, I'll then disclose, well, here's our aggregate. So I kind of end up knowing what everybody's is, but
Okay. That sounds fun.
yeah, let's do that. And then gosh, I don't know. What else is there to say other than check out the podcast Hair Metal Memories. It's cool. Check out Strong Like Bear. Brian, what else are you working on right now?
I wanted to say when I was listening to Bad Channels, I
Oh.
felt like that was the moment for me when I was having a crossover with Hair Metal Memories because there's so much hair metal on that album. There's like
Yeah.
Bon Jovi sounding songs and stuff like that on that album.
There is, yeah. Well, Josh, you made a good point. We should do a B.O.C. oddities thing where we could grab like Buck Dharma's Flat Out. We could grab the soundtrack Bad Channels, the Cult Classic record. We can throw some ideas around for that, but that'd be kind of cool. So yeah. And then as far as our own stuff, Josh, Brent and I, we do some music. Some of it's instrumental, some of it's a little quirky, some of it's
Very B.O.C. influenced.
it is, yeah.
B.O.C.
in
is
a
a
lot of
huge
ways.
influence for us in our music.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's all
And-
very rocky.
And one of our collaborators is also a novelist. Josh, I don't know if you want to say anything about him or not.
I would say that writing as H. Prescott Lemon, B.O.C. is a huge influence for me as a writer and storytelling because their music is so sci-fi and fantasy oriented that I think that they were a huge influence for me, a musical influence for the writing side as well.
Yeah. So if
Yeah.
guys, if anybody's still with us and they're big B.O.C. fans, please comment, tell us where we're, way off base. And if you're interested, check out some of the stuff that we are working on. We like to create stuff just because it makes life interesting. So
Mhm.
Fun.
yeah. Do you guys have anything else to say?
It's been fun.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. And Brian,
thank you.
Brent.
Mm,
Thank
and
you,
thank
guys.
you. Yeah. All right. Until next time, guys, I'm going to go ahead and hit the stop button. Toodles.